Excellent. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar discussing this new opportunity, streamlining success in nursing programs in Texas. We're very excited to be joined by our colleagues from the Trellis Foundation and from Higher Ed Insights to tell you a little bit more about this project, and most importantly, to hear directly from you about your questions, insights, and anything that you might need in order to feel prepared in participating in this new opportunity. So my name is Haley Glover, and I am Senior Director of UpSkill America with the Aspen Institute. And again, we are very excited to welcome folks to the webinar today. This is a partnership between UpSkill America, which focuses on employer-supported education, and the Trellis Foundation, which focuses on post-secondary attainment in all of its forms. And I will let the leaders of Trellis Foundation tell you a little bit more about their work in just a moment. But we're so excited to have you with us. And today we plan to give you an overview of this opportunity and answer your questions. Before we get started, though, I just have a couple housekeeping issues. Number one, we are recording this webinar and we will make it available publicly just as quickly as possible on our landing page for the initiative. Number two, we are reserving quite a bit of time at the end of this session for Q&A. So please don't hesitate to include your questions in the Q&A window. We will absolutely get to all of them. We'll also be monitoring the chat just in case. And if you'd like to share who you are, where you're joining from in the chat, we'd welcome that as well. Just in case you asked your questions in the chat, we will be taking a look. And we'll also use the questions you include today to update our frequently asked questions document that you can also find on the initiative website. And then finally, if you have a question that you're dying to ask in real life, not via text, please don't hesitate to raise your hand and we'll call you in. So all kinds of options to get your questions answered today. And we're really excited to have you here. And thank you, Fred from Kilgore, for starting the text chain. I'm really excited, as I mentioned, to both share a little bit about the initiative and welcome a really wonderful leadership team. This is the overview of our webinar today. We're going to be taking just a bit to tell you a little bit about the folks who you can see on your screen in front of you. We're going to let Kristen from Trellis Foundations give us a little bit of insight into what Trellis Foundation does. And then we're going to ask Jenny from the Trellis Foundation team to tell us more about this particular initiative. We'll do some nuts and bolts conversation about the project, its intent, goals, structure, that kind of thing, and eligibility, as well as give you some insights into the application timeline. And then finally, we'll go into Q&A. So that's what you should expect for the next hour or so. And if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to put those into the Q&A. And then I'm really excited to introduce this Crackerjack group. So as I mentioned, Kristen Boyer is president of the Trellis Foundation, joined by Jenny Achilles, who's Trellis Foundation's Senior Program Officer, Chelsea Miller, Associate Director of UpSkill America, Dante McGuire, Managing Director of HEI, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention John, also from HEI. He is a research associate, and Mia, who is Strategic Learning Officer with Trellis. They won't be necessarily talking today, but they are a part of the team. And finally, actually, I didn't mention Patricia Steele, who is founder and principal at HEI as well. They are evaluation partners. So you've got a great team of people who are leading this initiative and really all excited to be launching into this next phase. So I'm going to hand this over to Kristen to provide a little bit of welcome and share some insights about Trellis Foundation's goals and objectives with this work.
Great. Thank you so much, Haley. And I have to echo Haley's comments about the strength of this team and the excitement that we feel about this particular approach to eliminating some barriers for students who are pursuing such a timely and important profession. So I just want to say thanks to this team, to UpSkill America, to HEI. We're really looking forward to how this partnership unfolds. And also huge thanks to all of you who have joined us today to learn more about this work and our approach to it. At the foundation, everything that we do is centered on improving completion rates in post-secondary, whether that is certificate to associates to bachelor's level credentials, and we're very much aligned with the efforts in Texas to improve accessibility to credentials of value that result in meaningful employment and living wages for all Texans. So that is one of the pieces of inspiration for this work in particular, knowing about the shortages that we face in the state with qualified and experienced nursing practitioners. So excited about the potential here, delighted that you're joining us to learn more about it, and we look forward to the partnerships ahead. Just know that we approach our work with what we hope is a high level of curiosity and flexibility, and that is the way we want to operate with this work. And we really do encourage your questions, both now at the beginning of this process, and if you're selected for this work to go forward, we definitely want to be a partner with you in what you learn and experience, and the adjustments that may need to be made during the course of the project. So just know that we're approaching all of this with that spirit, and just want to hear from you, especially about any questions that you have about the work ahead. So with that, I want to turn it over to my fantastic colleague, Jenny Achilles, who can talk a little bit more just about the context for this particular RFP and the approach we're taking. So turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you, Kristen, and good afternoon. And I echo all of the enthusiasm of Haley and Kristen. We could not be more excited to be embarking on this learning together. Where we started with this was, and to Kristen's comment about being curious, we have been hearing from folks in the field how very difficult it is for students in nursing programs who are working full-time to pay their bills and then also working full-time in their practicum hours. So that was the pain point we came to this question with, right? How do we think about different ways that acknowledge the fact that students don't have 80 hours plus taking care of family, plus all of the other things, right? Students have the exact same amount of hours in their day that the rest of us do. And just what are different ways that we can brainstorm, and what levers can help make that easier, whether it's policy changes, et cetera. And I know Haley can speak to even more of that. But we came with the pain points, but not the answers. And so that's how we ended up reaching out to the UpSkill America team, was to help us think through, again, not the answers, but what are the ways we could approach together to find the answers. And so really excited to have their partnership on this. And it's interesting, you guys if you've worked with us before, you know Trellis Foundation likes to be very active, get to know folks through the application process and throughout the grant work. So this is a new one for us. We are relying on the UpSkill America team to serve as your point of contact, which again will be an adjustment for us, but we're still here and still excited to learn alongside them. So thank you so much for the opportunity to meet you all today.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jenny and Kristen, but for your trust in allowing this to do this with you, but also for your orientation to this project. As I think if you've read the project overview, the program overview, you'll note that we're trying to go into a lot of this with not prescriptions, but instead a learning orientation, an opportunity to hopefully give you some space and opportunity to run and walk and figure out where the solutions really are. And with a real intent to both study what you're up to and then make the things that are working available and transparent to the rest of the world who are also struggling with these same problems. So I really want to give kudos to the Trellis team for having the flexibility of mind and orientation to make this work. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our community of practice, what we're hoping to accomplish, and some of the details, all of which you can find in the program documents, but it never hurts to hear them straight from the horse's mouth. So this opportunity is really based on two primary objectives, and both of these must be included in your ultimate proposal, but they are of equal importance. Number one is we're hoping to enable nursing students working in healthcare environments to earn credit toward their clinical requirements through work. So in Texas, there was a wonderful policy, Guideline 3.7.42, that enables nursing students to meet their clinical hours requirements through employment. And those are based on the development of a partnership agreement between the education provider and the employer partner. So in other words, we're really looking to support partners here to enable more students to gain credit toward their clinicals through their work experience, rather than trying to add clinical experience on top of work. Using this unique opportunity with this policy, we hope to see more students complete their programs while working, reducing their costs and time to complete, and of course, ultimately more closely tying together academic and work experiences. So this is objective number one. Number two, we're hoping to identify and address policies and practices that restrict nursing students' ability to complete both academic and clinical requirements while they work. As Kristen and Jenny mentioned, right, there are not an extra 80 hours in a week, so we have to figure out how to do both of these things simultaneously. This may include things like shifting learning online or creating more flexible clinical placement systems and schedules. Instead of every Wednesday between 10 and 2, working from 8 to 10 at night, those kinds of things. Developing regional clinical placement and faculty recruiting systems, all kinds of approaches. And so we know that there are a variety of approaches that stakeholders can take to make completing a nursing program less burdensome and more in line with students' lived realities, which include work, without ever sacrificing quality, rigor, and the compliance that has to happen in order for students to reach that starting line of being having their credential. So enabling students to work means that they aren't taking such a significant hit in completing their clinicals, and that they're able to stay the course to complete their credentials, because we do know that many students stop out of their programs due to financial circumstances. So how deeply each applicant decides to go into each area is up to the applicant. If your organization, for example, already has deep work in addressing the nursing pipeline and enabling students to work and learn simultaneously, we'd expect to see more focus on objective one, and vice versa. So we're not telling you how to make the tuning board work, but we are hopefully giving you a tuning board where you can express where your organizational priorities lie. We are going to organize over the 3 years of the program a learning community that will include quarterly learning calls, annual convenings, regular opportunities to engage with the larger group, and as well as provision of technical assistance and evaluation support from our partners at Higher Ed Insight, and more from them in just a moment. We anticipate ultimately selecting 8 to 10 organizations that represent different regions in Texas to participate. And this is important. We don't expect to award more than one grant per region, so finding opportunities for collaboration and cooperation will be important. Each grantee will be eligible for up to $300,000 in non-renewable funding, and we anticipate dispersing that funding with roughly half upon signature of the grant agreement and the remaining 25% across the subsequent 2 years as needed, as well to address any issues that you might have in getting that grant agreement settled. To achieve the project goals, as I mentioned, partnership is going to be pretty key. My colleague Chelsea is going to talk more about eligibility requirements in just a moment, but I'll underscore this now. Eligible lead organizations include public and private post-secondary institutions in Texas, as well as workforce boards where that is most appropriate. Nonprofit, community-based, and for-profit organizations that may even serve nursing students, they are not eligible to apply as the lead organization. However, we would absolutely expect those organizations, especially healthcare organizations like hospitals, clinical practices, long-term care facilities, et cetera, to be included as partners in this project. Similarly, local organizations like chambers of commerce, nonprofit support organizations are not eligible to be lead applicants, but can partner with local colleges and workforce boards. So what partnerships look like in your region is, again, up to you. We know that work gets done in places based on relationships, unique capacities, conditions, and we think you're best suited to understand those. So we'll be looking for evidence of partnership between the organizations I've mentioned, but we're not going to dictate how that partnership should look to you. And as we mentioned, we're excited to learn from you about what works. So I'm going to turn it over right now to our colleague, Dante from HEI, who's going to give you a very brief overview about the evaluation plan for the project.
Thanks, Haley. As Haley shared, my name is Dante McGuire. I serve as Managing Director at Higher Ed Insight, and I'm really glad to be here today with you all, particularly the team that's so committed to curiosity, collaboration, and frankly, as we've heard through the earlier comments, trust in the broader community and grantees to deliver on good work and collaboration together. I am joined on camera by my colleague, John Arkaki, who's a research associate, but also off camera by our founder and principal, Patricia Steele, our Senior Research Director, Tashir Gell, and also a Senior Research Associate, Chris Kirk. And you'll see us over the term of this initiative in different roles and capacities, and we look forward to working together with the grantees. A bit about Higher Ed Insight. We're a research and evaluation firm that work nationally with nonprofits, foundations, colleges, and systems. And our team brings a deep set of experience in post-secondary education, workforce development, and program development. Program improvement, especially in efforts that seek to expand opportunity, improve outcomes, and strengthen systems of support for learners. We do approach evaluation not as an audit, but just as a way to measure, not just as a way to measure outcomes, but as a tool to build knowledge, support continuous improvement, and really tell the story of impact in real and human-centered ways. And we'll be serving, as you see on the screen, as the evaluation and learning partner for this initiative through gathering of formative insights that help inform and improve your work in real time. We'll conduct a summative evaluation to understand what's working and also where challenges remain, and also provide capacity building support so that even beyond the grant period, teams are equipped to sustain learning and evaluation practices internally. What we're most excited about, has been said a number of times here, is really learning with and from all of you. This isn't about our team coming in with answers, but really about co-creating knowledge together. And so your insights, your stories, your strategies, those that are really at the heart of this work for us and our team. And our job is to help surface them, make sense of them, and then share them in ways that are actionable and useful for the field as both practitioners and from a policy perspective. So I just want to say thanks again for the opportunity to be a part of this work. We're excited to get started and be on this journey with you all. And now I'll turn it over to Chelsea Miller, who's at UpSkill, to walk through the eligibility requirements and timeline for the application process.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dante. Really excited to be here with all of you and see so many interested participants. Haley gave a beautiful overview of this before, but I just want to double click and make sure it's really clear. The lead organization for these applications must be a public or private nonprofit institution of higher learning that serves students in Texas, particularly those based in Texas. Workforce boards may also apply as lead organization in rural communities where they serve as sort of the convener. As Haley mentioned, training organizations, for-profit organizations can serve as partners in this work, but cannot serve as the lead organization, as well as healthcare partners. I see several on the call today, which is really exciting, and we're eager and find it very important that you all be active partners in this work while not the lead in the work. So appreciate all of you being here and really just wanted to double click on all of that. We can go to the next slide and I'll share a little bit about the timeline. So you're all on the webinar, which is the first thing of the timeline, yay. Applications for this are due on May the 16th at 5 p.m. Central Time to the Texas Healthcare email address, and we'll drop that in the chat over the next few minutes as we take your questions. The week of June 2nd, it'll be our goal to have interviews with applicants and partner organizations to learn a little bit more about your specific project. On June 30th, we'll notify applicants of their project status. July 31st is when we hope to have all the grant agreements signed. And then hopefully payments dispersed within those 2 weeks. And then we'll start convening this community of practice and learning together in early September. With that, I'd love to open the floor up for questions. We already have had one in the chat that I'll read out, but we're here for the remainder of the hour to answer your questions and sort of be responsive to your needs. And then if you have questions offline or don't want to ask them in this larger format, you can always reach out to us at txhealthcare@aspeninstitute.org, which we'll put in the chat here in just a second. But the first question we've received is whether or not this initiative pertains to pre-licensure students or not. Shaylee, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And if I'm understanding it correctly, there's maybe a couple ways we can answer this. Number one, yes, generally, we're talking about students who have not yet achieved their initial licensure to practice as healthcare practitioners, as nursing practitioners. I don't want to say nurse practitioners, that's a role, but as nursing professionals, right? That said, if you have pipelines where you're, say, taking somebody from RN or LPN to RN, right? Or you're growing people up that ladder, those folks are absolutely open to be included in this initiative as well. That is economic mobility, that is career workforce mobility, and those are absolutely square within the goals of this project. So yes, I think the majority of folks within the project will very likely focus on that initial licensure, the initial role, but we're absolutely open to how this might work for those who are climbing that career ladder. So very much appreciate that question and very open to clarifying it if I misinterpreted what that meant.
No, I think that's great. The next question is, can grant funds be used to cover administrative or personnel cost at the employer partner?
It's a really good question. We're not being prescriptive about how the grant funding ultimately gets spent, though there are, of course, boundaries to it. You'll note in the project description and all the overview that we are limiting the overhead rates, that the indirect rates that are allowed to be spent within this project. But within the remainder, we know that the work will take place in different ways in different regions with different partners. And so we don't have a ton of restrictions. Now, what I would say is would argue very much for you to look at the nature of your partnership and say, is this something that they might, an employer partner might need a little bit of support to get off the ground. They might need half an FTE to be available to do something or another in developing the partnership agreement, or you might need to have more faculty who are based at the hospital share some of those costs. Those are things that can absolutely be included in the funding. What we'd ask you to do is consider at the upfront how the work and the people who are supported through the grant may be sustained over time. What we don't want to see is in 3 years' time, when the grant dollars go away, a total dissolution of the work. And so we're just asking folks to be mindful of how the budget structure you set up initially can be sustained and ultimately carried over time to keep achieving the outcomes of the goal or of the project. Jenny, anything that you might want to add to that? Okay, fantastic. That's a great call.
That's wonderful. Okay, the next question is, does the grant require a certain number of hours for the clinical portion, or can colleges use the WEC in clinical hours?
That is a great question. The grant does not require any particular number of clinical hours. What we know is that you know your own requirements best. And so whether you are working in, for a particular occupation, right, or a particular setting, we're going to let you and encourage you to build your programs and the project in the way that best fulfills your needs, given that you know the compliance structure far better than we ever could. We are going to be coming ultimately alongside where necessary based on your applications with technical assistance support. So we can anticipate that folks might need a little support in getting, for example, those agreements built between employers and the post-secondary partner. It is our intent to make sure that you're getting the best help you can get based on what your plan is. So we're not trying to, build it in anticipation of you asking for it. And so we're hopeful, if this is answering your question, we're hopeful that if you raise issues like what you're raising here, where you need specific assistance, where you need specific questions answered that we did not address in the program overview, we're happy to do the work to directly address it right now and plan for it going ahead in the project to make sure you're getting the assistance that you need. I hope that answered your question okay.
Yes, and if anyone has follow-up from questions that we ask through the Q&A, please feel free to drop it either in the chat or the Q&A function.
Excellent.
We don't have any other questions in the chat that I want to address directly, but Haley, maybe let's talk about where there is already partnership. Say there's an academic institution or a hospital system has a foundation. What is the clarity there that we can provide around eligibility?
Sure. So I think, like we said, we very much are hewing to our eligibility requirements, and those mean that we are hoping for the lead organization on the grant to be a post-secondary institution, private, nonprofit, right, public, or a workforce board. That's not to say that we know other organizations out there, including hospital foundations, including local organizations, are doing amazing work. But we know that in order for most of this work to take place, there absolutely do have to be fundamental things that happen within the post-secondary provider. And so we're centering them and then allowing workforce boards to apply and be lead organization where they're most appropriate. So Chelsea, you mentioned rural environments where perhaps you are trying to coordinate and organize across a very, very big, my mind can't grasp the geography of Texas. It's way too big, but you're negotiating across huge expanses of space and coordinating between multiple small institutions. That might make a ton of sense for a workforce board to be the lead organization. Similarly, in a big metro area, maybe there's a reason for a workforce board to be the coordinating entity across multiple large institutions, right? So we're trying to provide that flexibility in the lead organization. And what I would say to the particular question around the hospital foundation, that would be an amazing partner opportunity, right? Where if there's programming support, if there's funding support, if there's coordination support, to come alongside and be a partner to the lead organizations and partners in that work, I think that would be the ideal scenario. But again, I think this is one of those areas where if there are particular questions and really specific things that you want to address, we're happy to address those offline. But the idea of the learning community too is that we have like roles. So we're anticipating, having 8, 10, 12 post-secondary institutions at the table who are able to work constructively with each other. And healthcare employers who are struggling with the same issues, being able to work with each other to identify solutions, break bottlenecks, that kind of thing. And so the idea too is to have a working learning community that is not so disparate in its type of work that we can create some really effective structures to get that job done.
Awesome. Let's see. I'm having technical complications.
Okay. It looks like we've got a question around our daycare expenses and allowable expense. It's a really great question. Where we have come down on this is that we are not looking to support student stipends. So, as we were doing the landscape analysis for this project, which you can actually find on the project's website, we did explore things like, there are scholarships, there are student stipends, there are, ways of giving students money that can abate, the challenges that they feel by working in their clinicals and not getting paid for their 9 to 5 or whatever other format of job that they have. But for the purposes of this project, we're looking for longer term and systemic sort of solutions. And so what I would suggest is if there is, say, a partnership with a daycare provider that could be put in place to either utilize an existing pool of resources or provide get a buy down, those sorts of more systemic solutions, as opposed to, say, giving students X $100 a week to support their daycare expenses, which is a stipend. So long way of answering. We're not allowing student stipends or scholarships, but really do appreciate the focus on daycare as a pretty significant barrier to completion and also a logistical sort of issue that working learners have to work around. And so that's how I'll answer that question, is we're not allowing student stipends, but appreciate the opportunity to think critically about how we might solve that other issue.
That's great. Haley, our next question is, under the criteria in the opportunity for learning and scaling, are you all looking for external references or evidence-based practices to support the information and ideas included in the proposal?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I will say is we've done our homework, right? We are not nursing professionals. In no way, shape, or form are we qualified to do your jobs if you're in those roles. So we defer to you in many, many cases in knowing what works in your environments, what regulations and compliance activities you must do, all of that. But we have done some work, which you can obviously see in the paper I referenced earlier, and have a good understanding of what is happening and what is not happening in this space. So where appropriate, or if you're approaching, with a novel idea or something that is, based on a single study or something that we've not maybe come across, by all means, feel free to link up that research, that evidence in your proposal. However, we know that we've not given you months and months to produce a proposal. We know that the work you're going to have to do to produce the proposal in terms of developing the partnerships, getting everybody to sort of coordinate, is a lot, particularly at the close of the school year. And so what I would say is don't use your time justifying to us. Instead, feel confident and comfortable with the project you've submitted, that it will produce the results you want it to produce. And if we have any questions, we will 100% come back to you and ask for, hey, that's really interesting. We didn't come across that. Can you provide a citation or tell us where you came up with that? So that's how I'd make that call, is much less about the showing and telling for us and much more about the, building of a project that you can both feel proud of and feel confident that you can execute.
That's great. Our next question. To clarify, the funding itself cannot be used to support participants directly. How about incentivizing employers with cost sharing associated with paying nursing students?
That is a fascinating question and is a can of worms, right? So I think this is probably going to be a case by case basis, right? In almost every scenario, right, the healthcare provider will be the more resourced of the organizations participating in this work, right? Now, that said, there are a lot of healthcare organizations that operate on thin margins or don't have the staff that they need, and we 100% appreciate that. But what I would say is that we don't want to get into a scenario where the college or the grant is subsidizing the employer partner to then pay that, turn it around, right? It becomes sort of a stipend that's just passed through another set of hands. So I would caution you against sort of organizing that. But if you are going to enter into a partnership agreement with an employer, it could look like, maybe you buy a little bit of time from that employer partner to understand how do they make sure that their tuition benefit program that they have for current employees is able to be utilized for these current students? Or are there ways for their for their resources to say, go farther, go faster with a little bit of, human capacity, those kinds of things. So again, this is a place where we're going to be learning. We don't know all of the levers that are available to you to pull or all the nature of partnerships that you might have. And so I would say if you've got particular like fine-tuned questions, don't hesitate to send them to us and we'd be happy to address them. But I would caution you against sort of saying, well, if we just give it to the hospital and the hospital gives it to the students, can we get around the stipend rule? Mainly because when the grant goes away, the question becomes, well, how do students keep getting paid?
Yes, exactly. Okay, the next question. When partnership is established with a nonprofit organization, can a letter of support suffice for the evidence of support requested in the grant
Yes.
application?
Yes, absolutely. That's fine. We do not particularly want you to do like the exhaustive, like get a letter from everybody and their brother to tell you that you're legit or that you're going to be working together. What I would do is in the application, it gives you an opportunity to explain, who the partners are, what you've accomplished together, excuse me, the nature of your partnership, that kind of thing. What we'd be looking for is your sort of honest description in the application of, is this a brand new partnership that you've established just for the purposes of this grant? Is this a long-standing partnership you've had in place and they're totally on board with what you're going to do? We're looking to really understand that. And then, yes, a letter of support is fine. You do not need to have them, do anything. What I will say, and this is just born of being a grant maker for many years, but also participating in, say, federal grant application process reviews, is we'll be looking for the evidence behind the letter. So as Chelsea mentioned, in early June, we will be contacting finalists to do some interviews, to do some conversations, to make sure that, we have a chance to address any questions we have. Also give you chances to clarify things where we might not have understood what you're talking about. And we'll be looking to engage partners in those conversations with the idea that there's a lot to learn from them, and there's a lot to sort of understand about what water they'll carry for the purposes of the project. I would really encourage you to make sure that no point, nothing in this application is ever submitted without full knowledge and buy-in of the named partner. Do not share this and say, fingers crossed, we can make it work with the hospital down the road if we get it, because we will be testing that information. And also, I just know from past experience that is a way to sour a relationship faster than just about anything. So would encourage you just to do your diligence and bringing your partners aboard, making sure they're fully in the know, and then being transparent with us about what the nature of your partnership really looks like. But yes, long answer, letter of evidence or letter of support is just fine. Right.
That is the end of the questions we've received so far.
Terrific.
Haley, do you mind popping over to the next slide so folks can see the email address?
Yes, right there. I've been waiting with that one blank screen for a long time. My apologies.
No, it's great. Yeah. I just, I'm having some technical difficulty, like putting the email in the chat. So Haley just did that. Okay, so next question. Can you provide a little more information on what this initiative looks like on a day-to-day basis? If selected, what are the initial action items?
What a great question. Thank you for that, Cindy. So on a day-to-day basis, what I anticipate, though, of course, because we're not being prescriptive, we don't know what it'll look like for you, but what we can share from where we stand right now is this. On a quarterly basis, we'll have 90-minute virtual calls, which are intended to sort of bring together the group of folks who are working on this and start creating, the relationships, the connection points, the network that ultimately can make your work go farther faster, knowing that even though Texas is a gigantic state, in many ways, it's still very small when it comes to, people who are focusing on these particular issues. We will have an annual convening where we'll bring together people affiliated with the project in Texas. So we won't make you travel farther than in state to come together and sort of be, as you say, IRL, talking about these kinds of things. On a day-to-day basis, what I anticipate is that, the work that you'll do will be falling in those two objective areas. You might be working directly with an employer partner to set up one of those agreements in place that enable your working students to get credit for their work towards your clinicals, right? And that might look like, having a task force that is sitting down on a weekly basis to do the nuts and bolts work of aligning and making sure those competencies are covered. On the other side, on the other objective that's around streamlining and reducing bottlenecks, that kind of thing, what that might look like is doing increased surveying of your clinical placement sites to say, where are we not using capacity that we have? How can we best align students with that capacity, that kind of planning work, right? So what I would imagine is that you'll have various components of your organization working on this, and I would expect faculty and sort of nursing program administration to be involved, as well as partnership organizations outside, depending on the nature of the work that you're advancing. What we're going to be trying to do in all cases, and Dante alluded to this earlier, is that we are committed to not being burdensome, but hopefully making every single engagement point that you encounter in this project something where you look back and say, that was worth my time. I learned something today. I solved a problem today. I got supported today. I unknotted one of my threads today. We've got a particular, facility at that and in the work that Aspen does. And I can also say that I know that is absolutely the orientation that Trellis is taking to this approach, and how HEI is bringing their services to bear as well. So I would not expect a compliance heavy sort of project. I wouldn't expect endless spreadsheets. I wouldn't expect, nitpicky calls or emails. And so we are going to try our best to make this a supportive, fun, learning heavy project that actually helps you accomplish your goals. But it's a great question, Cindy, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the next question is, can you share a little more detail regarding the grant team interviews and how you envision the structure? How would you recommend teams prepare for these interviews?
Oh, it's another great question. And one I'm not probably fully prepared for, given that it is coming a ways off, but I've thought about it a little bit, and here's my answer so far. Number one, the intent of the grant of the candidate interview, the applicant interview, is not a gotcha kind of moment, right? It's an opportunity to meet you, right? Because there is a really wonderful thing that happens when you meet somebody in person or on the screen as opposed to on paper. And that's an opportunity that we want to have, right? So we want to get to know you a little bit. We want to have the opportunity to ask and answer questions in the, sort of conversation as opposed to bullet points in an email. So that's another objective of those meetings. And then with your partners, we want to have the opportunity to sort of hear and understand how you're going to work together, what your roles and responsibilities are, and how you sort of worked this sort of thing before, if ever, right? Because we're not excluding new partnerships from this. What we can promise we can do in advance is, number one, let you know with enough advance notice that you will be. And so, Chelsea, I actually think we probably need to adjust that timeline and make it later than the week of June 2nd. I'm just now thinking through the math here. What we can do is give you notice, right? So you're not going to be hopping on a call the day after we reach out to you, right? And number two, I think we can give you how to prepare for this interview, right? And that can be a summary of what I've just said, as well as anything else that we're hoping to address specifically with you. And that can include the questions that were, raised during the application review and anything else that is sort of rising to the top. So expect to see a revision. We'll update the documents to sort of reflect that we didn't, I think we looked at that and we're like, yes, that's enough time to read. It's not enough time to review those applications. We'll extend that a little bit. And then you can expect to hear from us around when we select folks to interview. We'll 100% make sure you're prepared for those. Thank you for that question.
That's great. Our next question is, how many grants are expected to be awarded?
Yeah, we expect to do 8 to 10. Though I think that could very easily go 7 to 12. And so that will depend on the number of applications we receive and then the ultimate quality of those applications. So that's our ballpark right now. We always reserve the right to adjust that. But what I think we don't ultimately want to do is dilute the resources that we have to such an extent where you can't accomplish the things you want with the grant dollars available. Now, we want to also make sure that this, we are really clear that the resources here, the grant dollars, while attractive, that are not really the big objective of the work. We know that there's not a lot that post-secondary institutions can accomplish with several $100,000 over 3 years. It's not enough to, boil an ocean or, fully launch a program. What it is enough to do is buy some resources, buy some time, get things in order. And because the resources are flexible, we hope to make sure that those dollars go farther than they would have otherwise. But we want to make sure that the purchasing power of the resources stays strong, and that we have ultimately a great group of grantees and partners that are working on the objectives of the project. So those are going to be our sort of major priorities, but I expect 8 to 10.
That's great. The next question is, I think, for both Haley and maybe Jenny, you also want to share a little bit about how we came to this conclusion, but can you describe the geographic regions that we've identified in Texas and how we're going to be prioritizing those?
Sure. I think we actually articulate in the application what regions those are. We pulled those from an economic development organization in Texas. So I think there are 12 to 15. And they're the ones that you'd expect. So the Metroplex and Austin area and West Central and the Gulf Coast region. And so what we're asking you to do in the application is to identify which region you fall into. And then we'll also, of course, ask you for your address so we can see what community you're a part of. As we mentioned earlier, it's our intent that this is a geographically diverse group of applicants and ultimate awardees, because while we know that, of course, there are huge population centers in Texas, we also know that the nursing shortage is acute everywhere. And so having opportunity to learn from rural communities, farming communities, gigantic, urban communities, and, communities on the southern border, that is all about generating the kind of learning we're hoping this project produces. Jenny, would you add anything to that?
I think that covered it really well, and I'm actually trying to pull back up to remember which the way that because we are aware that there's multiple different ways that folks slice and dice regions, which is why we selected one and went with that. I also know that for some of y'all that may end up being a really big geographic region. So I think we may be open to some conversations about what that looks like. What the main thing is that we understand there's a lot of people in, say, the Austin Round Rock Metroplex. We do not anticipate more than one. Like, that is not 2 different cities, that's one, right? Like, this is one region. So I think a lot of what we were trying to do is make sure that the entirety of Texas gets included in this opportunity. And so if you're at the very top of one region and another partner's at the very bottom and you couldn't possibly be collaborating because you don't serve the same students, please do go ahead and reach out to us. I don't think that would keep you from being able to apply. We just are not anticipating multiple grants awarded in the same city or town. So Haley, it's a really good question, right? Because those are big blocks of geography in some of those. And so, Haley on.
That's great. So I included the citation for where we found those economic regions. And really, this is about helping us to slice, dice, sort information. These are located under the project information area of the application. And so again, I would encourage you to not worry about it, but would also encourage you to think as much as you can about opportunities for collaboration where they make sense. Right. So thank you so much.
And just to further clarify, because I am gonna, along with you, ask a question.
Yeah.
So yeah, for example, I'm imagining that we could end up with, so I am not really great at some of my like discrete once we get towards the borders, but like Lubbock and Amarillo, not at all the same town, right? Like you're not going to be working with the same hospital. There's no way for you to collaborate. I don't think that we would say like Lubbock and Amarillo couldn't both apply, right? But we would not want we would not be able to fund 2 grants in Amarillo or 2 in Lubbock. Does that help clarify?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we ask you in the application, of course, about your, which area, which region you're in. We also ask you about whether you're rural, urban, suburban. We ask you about the lead of your organization. We ask you about your community, And so the idea here is, again, we're not trying to pigeonhole anyone. We're not trying to force things. What we're trying to do is make sure that we have all of the information that we need in order to paint the picture and really have a good description of the applicants we receive as we're evaluating. And so, yes, again, I would encourage you to think about, like, it's not just what region are you in, but actually where do your students live? Who are your actual employer partners? Who are your actual community partners that are enabling you to do the work? And then just, pick the zone that you're in so we can sort of see on a map sort of where things are. So I would not worry too much about that. Instead, let the nature of the work and the actual partnerships you have drive your geographic impact.
Yeah, so while we're on the topic of geography, there's a question: 8 to 10 awards over 12 to 15 regions suggests that individual colleges should plan to partner with other academic providers in their region. So maybe just double click on the academic element of that and how we want institutions to address the lead applications.
Sure. So I don't think we are expecting to see every single grant, application have 3 or 4 post-secondary partners attached to it. We know that that's not often, particularly in the more innovative sections of this work, we know that that's not how that work will often happen. You need to figure it out for yourself before you expand. That said, you might see collaboration between a 2-year institution and a 4-year institution, particularly if you see a great degree of transferability, across those sectors. You might, in a rural area where you've got nurses that are specializing in one thing coming out of one college and another thing coming out of another college, you might see a collaboration there because it makes the most sense. And so again, I don't want to get trapped up in the math when I say geographic diversity. I don't mean that we will necessarily fund a project in every single region, just that we don't expect to fund multiple projects in the same community. So I appreciate the double clicking on this point.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay, our next question: could we provide additional examples of the technical assistance that applicants could ask for beyond help with drafting agreements with employer partners?
Yeah, absolutely. What you might ask for, this is why we're not setting it up in advance, is because we really want to know what you would like to see. So off the top of my head, some examples in addition to that one about the support and setting up those agreements. If your institution is considering, for example, a more competency-based approach, you want to get your nursing programs more aligned with, a CBE approach, that would be the kind of, because it makes the other things that you're doing here more straightforward, streamlined. That would be an opportunity to ask for some support. If you're looking for some exemplar work to say, we want to build off a program that we know has worked in another region that has done consolidation and coordination of clinical placement slots. That would be another area where we could say, oh, let's take a look at another program and bring them in to support the learning of this group. If there are, say, you want to take didactic learning online, you've not yet explored that, that would be another opportunity for you to say, I'm looking for some support, some guidance on how to best do that and avoid some of the problems that other institutions have faced. That's another place. So I would say, like, what we're not going to be able to do is to address every single component of exploration, because that's where the learning happens. But what we can help you with, and what we're really eager to understand, is where are the big sort of thematic areas where multiple partners, multiple applicants are going to want and need support. How can we best organize them to learn from them, and make sure that the progress you make is hastened and improved by including that technical assistance. And I say that because I have been a part of initiatives that have included technical assistance and have ended up not particularly being assistive. It's ended up being sort of a burden to project progress. So we're hoping to inject where it's necessary, learn where it's happening, and ultimately help you be more productive and make better progress along your path to implementing your objectives. So that's our sort of orientation to technical assistance.
That's great. The next question, and I'm just flagging, we have 4 minutes left, so feel free to place in the chat or in the Q&A any final questions you have. So we currently have in place an agreement with a local hospital where students are paid by the hospital for their school clinical hours in their final semester in return for a job commitment upon graduation. Would this kind of program exclude us from the eligibility for this grant?
I don't think so. I think it's a pretty interesting approach. And what I think we'd be interested in learning from is, number one, like, how are students included in that agreement? So is the employer partner only selecting, say, the top 10% of the graduating class? Or is that a systemic solution that is benefiting an entire class, right? As opposed to only a select few? I think we'd want to understand that. We'd love to, I think, understand the nature of that agreement and whether it's replicable or whether it's sort of something that's only enabled by the presence of a particular kind of hospital system, or only size or something like that. But I think it's an interesting idea, and where we are really interested in understanding is, what are the systemic, sustainable solutions that can get us to more students who are able to be able to work while they're doing their clinicals, and ultimately solve the problem now and into the future, and again, not make it contingent on just having grant dollars now or having that particular group in place now. Yeah. But
Agreed.
It's great. I'm kind of excited to see that.
Yes. Okay, last question. What is the average dollar amount of a grant award?
Yeah, we're expecting that grants, we've asked you in the budget and overview that you write your budgets and proposals for no more than $300,000. That does not guarantee you $300,000, but that is what we're anticipating the average grant amount to be. And so that's what we'd ask. It, again, we'll come back to you where we have questions and all of that, but that's the number we gave you in the proposal. So
okay, we got one more
question, and it's a good one.
Yes. Are there examples of partnerships in other states that you feel like are good examples for replication?
This is really exciting. In our landscape analysis that we did, you are one of few states that does a couple things interestingly. Number one, you don't have a restriction for students who are doing their clinicals to be paid. There are actually some states that bar students from being paid during their clinicals. So that's barrier number one eliminated. Number two, you do have this unique policy that allows students to earn credit toward their clinicals through work-based learning. And again, a lot of other states don't have that. So our analysis of the situation leaned really heavily on those two policy conditions, and makes actually other states not great examples for it. So that said, I'd encourage you to take a look at the landscape, mainly because we did do quite a bit of research around, the various conditions and opportunities here, and that's how we arrived at this unique, situation that we're supporting here. But Fred, if you've got other questions around, hey, do you know of an example of this specific thing? Don't hesitate to reach out to TX Healthcare at aspeninstitute.org, and we're always happy to address that question. So, okay, well, we're at time and we want to be respectful of everyone's calendars, but we appreciate the 50+ folks who joined us today. We appreciate your questions and your insights here. We will get the FAQs updated very quickly, and you'll be able to find this recording on our project website within the next day or two. In the meantime, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions to TX Healthcare at aspeninstitute.org. And Kristen, Jenny, Dante, John, Chels, thank you so much for being a part of this and for contributing your time and insights here. Y'all are great. All right. Thank you, everybody. Take care.